Welcome back. Good morning, Richard. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. Happy whatever day it is today. Got a good topic though.
Yes,
Um,
we have a
kind
very
of
important topic.
right. In one way, an extension of what we talked about a few weeks ago,
That's right.
but in some way, a very new and different look at
Yeah.
a topic that we encounter on a regular basis.
Yes, because we talk to patients and families and parents about this all the time because, let's face the reality that a lot of relationships, a lot of marriages, they don't make it to that forever that we often think that it will make when we first enter into
Mhm.
those relationships. And so a lot of times those marriages end in divorce, and many of those marriages involve children. And so then we have this situation where the marriage is over. Now what? Now what do we do? And you've done all of these, you've gone through all this process of getting the divorce, but you still have the kid. And so it's important that we talk about what happens next.
Right. A few weeks ago, we talked about something called parenting marriage,
Yeah.
which and the idea simply is that you acknowledge that the romantic part of your marriage is over, but you have children, and now you have to. Parenting marriage is a redefinition of what your marriage contract looks like. It was a romantic relationship at some point. Now the romance is gone. You're moving in different directions, but you have children. And so you redefine your marriage in terms of what's best for your children.
Right.
It's not something that all couples can do. Some couples don't want to cooperate during separation and divorce. But the idea is the same, that you have children to take care of. And regardless of the turmoil and anger and exhaustion, the emotional toll that it's going to take on everybody, you have children to take care of, and that becomes your obligation. And that's what we want to talk about today is co-parenting from separation through reconciliation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because again, as you very well said, while the marriage is over, while the romantic, the interpersonal romance is over between the two parents, you still have to work together to raise your children. And
Right.
it's something that you say often, and I think it's an interesting way to say it, but I think it is very well said. And that is, you said, you often say when you have children, you're never really divorced. And
Right.
that is that you're never really completely separate. When you don't have kids and you get a divorce, you may never see or talk to or hear from that other person again.
Right.
But when you have children, there continues to be a link between you that will last for as long as you have your children are alive.
That's right. For anybody who's been divorced, you know that you're going to continue to encounter each other at school, birthday parties, holidays, graduations, weddings. You're going to have grandchildren someday. And so you're going to continue to encounter each other, and your children, all of you, the spouses and the children, are going to have to negotiate this new relationship. And
Right.
what we're suggesting today is let's be thoughtful about this new negotiation, about this new relationship that now is going to evolve. And it revolves around your children.
Right.
Um, in an earlier podcast, we mentioned that there are four ways to get divorced. Everybody thinks of litigation in court and anger and animosity and having an adversarial relationship. It doesn't really have to be that way. There are some couples that divorce and separate without attorneys. They
Right.
just make an agreement and file it at the courthouse. Or you can go to a mediator with or without attorneys. And then there's a new concept, at least in our area, called collaborative divorce, where everybody agrees to cooperate and work for the welfare of the children. And then the last thing, if everything else breaks down and you can't reach agreement, you can go through litigation where the parties sort of negotiate what it will look like. But regardless of which one you use, it's difficult or impossible to shield the children from the separation. But if you don't reach an agreement, and this is what many parents don't understand, and I was talking to a judge about this one time, and he said, I wish parents would cooperate because if you don't, the state is going to tell you how you and your children are going to live. The state, in the form of a judge, the judge represents the state. The state is going to tell you how you and your children are going to live a large portion of the rest of your lives.
Absolutely. And and again, it's impossible to completely shield and protect your kids from a divorce. I mean, they're going to know some things that are going on. Obviously, one of the parents aren't living in the home anymore, and they're going back and forth between the homes. And so you can't shield the children completely from
Right.
what's going on. But as you're working through it, the more the more agreement that you find, the better that you can work together, the better things are going to be overall. We often
Right.
talk about the emotional cost of divorce on kids, and everything that you read talks about, well, it's horrible for the children. Parents should do everything they can to stay together. Well, there's some other research that suggests, maybe some of the problems that kids have following a divorce really are rooted in problems that happened before
Right.
the divorce because of the way the parents were interacting. But we certainly know that the problems that happen after the divorce has less to do with the divorce itself and more to do with the way the parents are interacting.
Exactly. Right.
When parents are constantly fighting and arguing, and they can't even do exchanges where the child goes from one home to the other home, they can't even do that without yelling and screaming at each other. What do you think is going to happen to the child? The
That's right.
child loves both parents, and,
Hmm.
and both parents are very meaningful and important in the child's life. So for that child to hear one person that they love dearly yell and scream and say horrible things about the other person that they love dearly, what do you think is going to happen to that child?
Right. No, and we forget about that these children are trying to negotiate these two people they care about or should care about, hopefully care about,
Mhm.
and they're watching this warfare. If we stay together for the children, but if everybody in the family is miserable and
Right.
you're not really building a family life, then you need, there may be a better alternative than staying together. The problem we get into, though, when we talk about separation and divorce, is your attorney has one job. And,
Right.
and we often forget about this. The attorney's job, their oath is that they will represent you as well and aggressively as possible.
Right.
That's what the contract is. They will represent you as well and aggressively as possible. There's nothing personal. There are no emotions involved. In fact, if you live in a small town, your attorney might even have a personal or business relationship with you or your ex. And
It is impressive the way that attorneys do that, that they can know the other attorney personally, they can know the individual clients personally, but
right,
their oath, their mission is to separate that from the work that they're doing as a hired litigator or attorney. And it's impressive the way that they do that, but it's also very can be very problematic from our perspective that they do that, because you're absolutely right. Their goal is to get you the best situation possible.
right,
And if you want something, they're going to do whatever they can do to make
that's
that
right.
happen. And you and I work with a lot of attorneys, especially family attorneys, and
Hmm.
there are some that don't that are better about this than others. Some that really take into consideration the reality of what's going on, and they're mindful about their
Right.
clients, their kids' needs, and everything.
Hmm.
There are others that are just, well, we refer to them as bulldogs. They just go after it, and they don't let go until they have everything.
Yeah, some are more aggressive than others, as in every field. It's the same in every profession. But that's the attorney's job.
Right.
But you, on the other hand, have two jobs, and we often forget this. Parents, in the process of while they're divorcing, you have two jobs. One of your jobs is a business deal.
Mhm.
You're going to sit down with your attorney and you're going to hammer out a business deal. And there's nothing emotional about it. And what you have to ensure, what your job is in the business deal, is to make sure that you get your share of the assets to
Right.
which you're entitled under the law. What you don't want to do is to go after more than your share. That's when you're going to get into trouble. Florida law, and I think probably most states, are very clear about how property should be distributed. And we like to think in terms of a 50, each of you gets half of
Right.
what your marital assets are.
Yeah, they basically have a formula for a lot of that. It's just there's no, like you said, there's no emotion to it. It's just
Right.
you make X amount, you have X amount. This is what was acquired during the course of the marriage, and so this
Right.
is how it's separated and divided.
Right. And that's when once people understand that, when they enter the divorce process, once they understand that you're entitled to half, but that's really all you should get. But even that can be adversarial. And when you're going through this business contract about splitting the assets, you have to think more like an attorney, but don't let your anger and hurt get in the way, because that's
Absolutely.
when you get into trouble. Your first job is a business deal, and you don't want anger and hurt and feelings about what happened to get in the way of this business deal. Okay.
Absolutely.
But you have a second job,
And this
and
second
that
job
is
is the most important job from our perspective.
it is. It really, and we forget that there is this second task that you're going to have, both parents are going to have it. You have to set up a co-parenting plan that works not for you, but that works for your children.
Right.
And this is a completely different skill set. This is a
Yes.
completely different process than the legal contract that you're going to go through with your attorney.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's
Now,
important here because now, like you said, the other, you're thinking like your attorney, you're negotiating, and you're looking at these assets as it's almost a black and white type of thing. It's like this is
right.
yours, this is mine, and this is the way that's working.
Mhm.
With the kids, that fighting has to stop. You have to put your sword away
Right.
and sit down and figure out how you're going to work through this in a cooperative and
Right.
collaborative way.
That's right.
You can't keep fighting as though the children are pieces of furniture
That's
or
right.
money
They're
in the bank. You can't treat them that way.
Yeah, don't think of your children as marital assets.
Right.
That's the china and the furniture and the bank accounts. But if you can work through the first part, the legal part, in a cooperative way, it makes this second task much, much easier. And
Right.
that's what you have to remember. There are two tasks. And if you cooperate in the first one, the co-parenting part, this second task, where you also don't want your emotions to get in the way, your anger and your emotions with each other. And here, instead of thinking like an attorney, we would say you got to think like a preschool teacher or a nanny or a coach or somebody who has the best interests of the children at heart.
Right. Yeah. Like a preschool teacher, because the preschool teacher isn't concerned about your couches and the money in the bank. They're not focusing on those things.
Right.
They're focusing on your child's development and
Right.
how your children are going to respond and survive this disruption in their life. And
Right.
we're gonna post a number of articles in the show notes so that you can find some tips and some recommendations for this and for how to look at some of these things. But generally speaking, there are some general guidelines that we recommend
Right.
and that we encourage people to think about. And one is to set aside as best you can some of that hurt and anger. We were taught, Richard, we were talking the other day about a couple of families that you and I are working with. And
Mhm.
again, there's this recurring thing that is fascinating that it happens. A couple separates and they're going through the divorce, and now what was a marriage, what was them working together, is now adversarial, and
Right.
now the things that each parent is doing that maybe 5 months ago was just fine or at
Mhm.
least accepted
Right.
is now cause for litigation. So, 5 months ago, it was okay for you to leave your children home alone with their father.
Right.
But now, 5 months later, nothing necessarily has happened. Nothing has changed. He is exactly the way that he was. And of course, assuming that there's no abuse or anything like that going on. But 5 months later, you don't want to leave the children alone with him. You say the children aren't safe to be alone with him.
Right.
That's just your hurt and anger talking. That
Right.
is just your hurt and anger guiding your what you're pursuing with this divorce to the point that you're just hurting, trying to hurt the other parent, but you're also hurting the kids.
Right.
Why could
Right.
they be alone with their dad 5 or 6 months ago, but now all of a sudden, because he lives in an apartment or because he's not living in the family home anymore, now all of a sudden he's not competent enough for you to leave him alone with the kids. That
Right.
doesn't make sense. And we
Right.
see it all the time.
That's right. And so the first in all of these articles, somewhere in each one of them, it is recommended to set aside your hurt, set aside your anger, think only about the children for a moment. You can talk about legal and financial stuff later. But when you're planning for the children, you have to put that aside and not have this, try not to have this adversarial relationship when you're making decisions about the children's best interest. And in the second part, the second recommendation, we want to talk about children's best interests because that's something that we don't do a very good job with that.
Absolutely. And we do a lot of custody evaluations or social investigations to help offer some recommendations to the courts as far as who gets how much time sharing or how the time sharing is split up between the parents. And as part of that, at least here in Florida, we have specific statutory guidelines that we have to go by. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, or what we always have to consider really is that what is in the best interest of the kids, and which parent seems to have the children's best interests in mind. And invariably, both parents say and talk about what they believe is the child's best interest. Now, the problem, of course, is that they're a little bit different. That one parent says, it's in the kid's best interest for them to spend all their time with me. And the other says,
Mhm.
it's in their best interest for them to spend all their time with me.
Right, right,
We get
right,
that. That's understandable. But what we're really talking about here is it's in the child's best interest to have a healthy, loving, and consistent relationship with both parents
right, right.
most of the
There's
time.
a, there's a concept, and you see it in all of the legal documents that we deal with. What is in the best interest of the children, and this concept of best interest of the children. In Florida, we have this 50-50 aspirational goal. We'd like to have it be 50-50. It's
Right.
not a law, it's not mandated, it's aspirational, it's recommended, it's the ideal. But that's what's fair, 50-50. But what is fair may not be best.
Right.
Okay, it may be best for children to spend the entire school week with their mother, okay, because the house is organized, they can do their homework, their clothes are there, and spend additional time with dad some other place, or vice versa. Maybe it's best to be
Right.
with dad.
Right.
It depends on what your schedules are. But you have to think in terms, put the children first. What is in the best interest of the child may not be the aspirational goal for the parents.
Right.
Yeah, we want 50-50, but that may not be a good idea. Bernie, we see horrendous visitation schedules.
They're
That
terrible.
just, I would never want to be a child. I mean, they're living out of backpacks. They're
Well,
spending a half a day here and a half a day there, and 2 days here and 3 days there.
yeah.
It is so incredibly disruptive. That's fair, but it's not in the best interest of the children.
Well, and it's fascinating because invariably in those situations, like I have a family that I've worked with, or well, I will say a number of families that I've worked with, where it's the children are with mom on Monday and Tuesday, dad on Wednesday and Thursday, mom Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then dad on Monday and Tuesday, then mom on Wednesday and Thursday, and dad on Friday. So it's okay, it's 50-50, but the kids are constantly going back and forth.
And
And
they hate it.
when you talk to the parents are like, well, I just don't want to go that long without seeing my kids.
Mhm.
Well, no kidding. Of course you don't want to, but you can't make the kids live as gypsies going back and forth between the two homes, and they're
Right.
constantly, they're like nomads. They have no consistent place where they're sleeping. And
Right.
the other piece I think that really is important when it comes to what's fair versus what's best for the kids is you have to consider developmental things.
Right. That's
Um,
correct.
my goodness, Richard, how many times have you worked with a family where it's like, well, they took 5 minutes of my parenting time because they were 5 minutes late, and so I need that 5 minutes back.
Jesus.
What are you doing with 5 minutes?
Right.
And what are your kids doing when they're with you for that extra 5 minutes?
Right.
They're probably in their rooms, not even doing something with you specifically. They're just hanging out in their rooms. And teenagers, don't even get me started with teenagers. Parents are like, well, he's 16 years old, but he needs to be at my house 50% of the time. A kid's a 16-year-old isn't, especially if he or she is driving, they're probably not even home 50% of the time.
Even if you still are married.
Right.
Just
Because they're out with their friends and they're going and doing things. And
That's
so,
right.
yes, we totally get, we're both parents and we totally get the importance of spending time with your kids and having kids under your roof and being there where you can hear them and you can see them when you want to and need to. But that's not, maintaining that after a divorce isn't necessarily what's best for your kids.
Right.
So you got to look at them, what they need developmentally, but also what they need emotionally and
Right.
developmentally.
Yeah, there are cases, and I know you've had these cases where you might have a child and the mother isn't working, but the father is.
Right.
And the visitation is that the child must go with the father. Then the father has to hire a babysitter
Right.
to take care of the child, or a nanny, or
Mhm.
somebody to take care of the child while he's at work. In the meantime, the mother's sitting there alone. Well,
Right.
what's in the best interest? Yeah, the dad gets his 50%,
Yeah.
but is it in the best interest of the children to be with the mother
Right.
for those 3 days, or to be with a babysitter for three
Right.
days?
Right. Yeah.
What,
Dad, I'm sure, is perfectly willing to pay for the babysitter or the nanny to
right.
watch
Mhm.
for the time when he's out. But why?
Right. Why would you do that to your children?
Right. And they'll say, well, I just need to make sure that I have my time. And okay,
That's not about the child. That's about you. Right.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So be very careful. When you talk about the best interests of the children, make sure you're talking about the children and not about what's fair or what you deserve, what is yours. Okay.
Absolutely. Now, another consistent
Big.
recommendation
Mhm.
is communication. And
Right.
okay, yeah, we get it that people communicate and they talk and that kind of stuff. But my goodness, when you talk about when we're talking about communication, we're not just talking about the dissemination of information or the sharing of
Right.
information. We're talking about the tone and the language, the vocabulary, and just the manner in which we communicate with each other. The type of, are we asking for things or are we demanding things? Are we listening to what the other person is saying, or are we just expressing what we want and not receiving anything that they're trying to share?
Right.
And again, this is a very consistent problem that couples have following a divorce when they're trying to work with their kids. And it's all, again, usually parent focused, what I want or what I need or what they're doing to me or how they treat me. And
Mm.
rarely or not as often is it kid focused. It's not, this is what the children need.
Right.
You have to
That's right.
watch all of those things when you're talking about communication.
Right. The kids are not feeling well, so could we have the could we do the switch tomorrow instead of today?
Right.
Yeah, that's what do the children need?
Right.
When you talk to each other, look, if communication was easy and pleasant, you'd probably still be together.
Right.
Right. So we know that there are differences. We know that there are hurt feelings. We know that there's animosity. But when you communicate with each other, you have to communicate more carefully, because
Mhm.
what you're trying to do is to defuse and take
Right.
the emotion out of this arrangement. And you have to be careful of your tone. You have to make requests instead of expectations. You have to listen carefully, practice restraint. Be careful about how you communicate, because poor communication can undo even the best plans that you can make if you're
Absolutely.
nasty in the way you communicate with each other. So be very careful about how you communicate.
Yeah.
Request a set of demands, listen carefully to each other, try to be understanding.
Right. And remember that, you know, presumably, ideally, both of you have the best interests of the kids in mind. You both want what's best for the child. And if you're approaching it from that perspective and you're communicating from that perspective, it's going to go much smoother than it would if you assume that the other person is just trying to take advantage and try to get more than what they deserve, or however parents choose to talk about it. You know, be kind from the perspective of the kinder you are to your former spouse, the better it's going to be for your kids.
Right. That's right. For everybody. For
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely.
Now, the next three are a little bit easier. I think people are a little bit better with these than they are with the first three.
Oh,
Consistent routines. Try to do the same, try to have the same routines at both houses.
right.
But even if you can't get both houses on exactly the same routines,
Mhm.
at least have consistent routines in your house.
Right.
Because I would rather have children have two different routines that are consistent rather than chaos in one house and routines in one house.
Absolutely. And this we deal with this oftentimes when we're talking about parents who live geographically in
Right.
geographically different places.
Mhm.
So, even if you live, if you think about it, even if you live 20 minutes apart, one of you could live on one end of town and the other on the other side of town, but it could take 30 minutes to get from one place to the other.
Right.
So, but when you're thinking about going to school,
Mhm.
so if the child is with one parent, school is 5 minutes up the road. If you live with the other parent, it's 30 minutes away. And so that changes, that calls for a very different routine.
Right.
And that could be a routine that is just fine and works just fine for the child, or it could be a
Mhm.
routine that really disrupts things and makes
Yeah.
it difficult for the child getting up in the morning because now they have to get up 30 minutes earlier and they have to ride in the car for 30 minutes before they get to school. And that can be really difficult. So, you
Right.
know, looking at those routines is really important. But what goes with that is respecting the boundaries. You know, if as the one of the parents, if I know that, man, the kids have to be in bed by 8 o'clock, because if they're not, it's going to be tough for them to get up in the morning. And your routine, the other parent's routine makes it to where we kind of change things up, and so we're not going to get them home until 9 o'clock. Well, that's a big problem. That's not
Mhm.
respecting what the other parent is trying to do and trying to accomplish. Yes, the kids it's on your time, and yes, the kids are doing things with you, and yes, that may be wonderful, but it's going to create other problems when you don't, communicate and respect the boundaries and the routines and expectations of the other parent.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And that respecting boundaries is another essential ingredient here. You know each other. You know what your hot spots are. You know what your triggers are. You know each other's triggers. So respect the boundaries. One parent might want to be called and say, hey, look, I'm going to have the kids there in 15 minutes. Just let me know that they're coming so that I can get everything ready. And if I'm doing something, I have time to get ready for the visit. And you know how I am about time. You know that I need to have a little bit of a warning. So try to respect each other's boundaries because, again, it's a way of showing respect for each other, which moderates it moderates the adversarial relationship, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce the emotional content here, with the emotional tone of all of this.
Right.
So work a little bit to respect each other's boundaries. And the last one is, please be flexible. I
Right.
mean, you have
Life happens.
you said earlier, if the family was intact and the kids went to visit somebody for 2 days, you would not think about, well, I'm missing my 2 days, so I have to get them back somehow.
Right.
Or, well, you were 5 minutes late, so I get my 5 minutes at the other end. Be flexible, be understanding with each other.
Right.
If it becomes a consistent problem, then you can get some advice on how to deal with it. But be flexible. Kids get sick, kids have projects to do, and it might be easier for them to spend the night, even though it's not your turn. it might be easier for them to spend the night there and deal with it later, but do what is best for the children.
Absolutely. So it's all about the language we use, the way that we communicate, the way that we understand the situation, and most importantly, it's all about putting what the kids need above what you want. And you know, we strongly encourage parents to think about that. The marriage is over. You know, that part of the relationship is taken care of. And so nobody's asking you to live with the other person anymore. Nobody's asking you to, you know, deal with all those relational, intimate issues that you were dealing with that led to the divorce. Nobody's asking you to deal with that anymore. We're asking you to take care of the responsibility that you have to parent these children together in a way that's going to be best for the kids. And that may mean that you have to put some of your own ego and your own perspectives aside and what you want aside, but it's for the children. And that's what's important. That's what's going to preserve and minimize some of that damage that divorces can cause.
Right, right. Just keep the kids first. Keep what is really in the best interest of the children. Put that first. Fairness is another issue. You know, what we have to have equal everything. No, you're not going to get equal everything.
Yeah.
So forget about what's fair, forget about equal, and switch your thinking to what do my children need?
Absolutely. All right. That is it for today. I'm sure this is a topic we'll be back at periodically. There's always something to talk about in this topic. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.